Instagram Live. I am here today for our Wednesday night Technique a Week craft club, and this week I am going to be talking about crocheting a stuffed animal. I'm specifically going to be working to start with, as I'm giving some tips and tricks to get started with my pattern. It's up for sale on Ravelry. It's called Celia the Cephalopod, and it's an octopus because I'm a giant nerd. And so I'm going to kind of talk through that pattern a little bit and just go sort of with the very basics, how to get started with some of those techniques. A lot of the basics of doing the crochet stuffed animals are going to be really similar. There's kind of just a few shapes that you're generally going to be working with. And then when I'm finished going through that, I'm actually going to crack into this little Amigurumi kit, mostly because my kid decided that she saw this and decided that she wanted it because it kind of looks like her. And so I've never read the instructions for these ones. These are for sale through our website and on our yarn truck. But I just wanted, it's a kit that's supposed to come with all of the stuff that you need to make it. And I just thought it would be fun to go through this a little bit and see how well the tips that I gave you from my pattern work for a pattern I've never seen before. And I'm sorry I'm all flustered. I was hauling buckets of maple sap from our yard into our house. Our sap has really started running in the last few days, and so we've probably, I don't know, there's probably been 50 gallons of maple sap. 5-gallon buckets are heavy when they're full, and I'm a little over it now. This is our first year doing maple sap to boil down into maple syrup, and it's hard work. I know why maple syrup is so expensive now, so that's why I'm a little flushed and red. I wanted to get them in the house before it got dark. So to get started with my tips for the crocheted stuffed animals, the first thing that we're going to talk about is how to create a circle in crochet. Generally, most crocheted stuffed animals are going to involve a lot of creating circles and creating tubes. So if you see like this example here, let me actually pop this open and get the pattern out so you're not seeing it through the glass. So most stuffed animal patterns, you're going to you'll start at the top, you're making like a ball for her hair. Like you'll start at the top and you'll create a flat circle, and then you'll just start doing rounds that creates like the tube. That's how you'd start a hat. That's how you start the hair. That's how you start the head. That's how you start the body. You do the exact same thing for the arms and legs. They're just itty bitty versions of those. And so that's probably the main thing, the main skill that you need in crochet to get started with a crocheted stuffed animal. And that is what we're going to do based on my pattern, Celia the Cephalopod. You start either at her head and create that as a circle getting larger, or you start at the end of one of her legs and do the same thing. My particular pattern says this does use most of the yarn that I recommended, and so I actually in the pattern recommend start with the legs, make all 8 legs the same length, the full length that the pattern tells you to, and then go back and do the head, like the head body of the octopus at the end. That way, if your gauge is off from the pattern, and your head has to be just a little bit shorter than it was designed in the pattern, at least all 8 legs are the same length, rather than if you run out of yarn halfway through the 8th leg, you can't have one stubby short little leg on your octopus. I mean, you can, but I think it would be hidden more, and you might be happier with the result if you do the head. So and when I talk about there being two main, or the main skill is starting with the circle, and then you create a tube or a ball for either an arm or a leg or a head or a body. There are kind of 2 different ways to make a circle. One of those is to create a true circle, and one of them where you make a circle and then you do a turning chain and then you make the next circle and then you do a turning chain and then you make the next circle. The other way is going to be to do a spiral. So you're never doing a turning chain, and this one's easier. If you've ever, I struggle with this in crocheted hats sometimes, where my seam kind of wanders as I struggle to figure out exactly which stitch do I put my hook into when I'm working into that to close the circle to start the turning chain again. So if you're going in a spiral, you avoid that altogether. So my legs of my octopus tell you to do a spiral because that is my preference. So the first thing that you're going to do to get started is you are going to start by tying a magic knot. This is a fancy way of saying a slip knot where the tail controls the loop. So my first recommendation is tie a slip knot whichever way you normally do, and then pull on the tail. And if the pulling on the tail makes the loop get smaller, you've already tied a magic knot. If not, this is how I tend to do it. I have my my yarn like this. I turn it, I reach through the loop, and I grab the tail, like grab the short end. And if you've grabbed that short end, then the short end is always going to be the one that controls it. The reason that you want to do that most of the time when you're starting a circle in crochet is we're going to work into this loop, and then when we've gone all the way around it, we're going to pull this tail to make the top of that circle, or like the end of the arm or leg or head, close up, so you don't have a big open gap where your stuffing falls out. So we've got our magic loop, or our magic knot, and we are going to work 8 single crochets into that loop. So we just work our 8 single crochets. So to do that, you are going to take your hook, you're going to go right into the middle of that loop. I like to leave my loop really big so it's really easy for me to tell exactly where I'm going. You're going to lay your yarn across, pull through one, lay your yarn across, pull through another. And so we're going to do that for 8 single crochets through there. And when we're finished with those 8, we've got our 8 on there. Now I'm just going to pull that tail, and it's going to cinch that closed. So now we've got the top of our, this is going to actually be like one of the ends of one of the tentacles for the octopus for this pattern. And now that's telling you're going to join with a slip stitch. So we're just going to connect. It's kind of a Pac-Man right now rather than a perfect circle. I said that when I was teaching a class one time, and one of the younger people in the class had never heard of Pac-Man, and it made me feel incredibly old. So we're just going to use a slip stitch to close that Pac-Man up. So now we truly do have a circle all the way closed. And now the pattern says don't do a turning chain, don't chain one. We're now going to do because we're going to be doing a spiral. And so from here on out, it doesn't matter where the beginning of your row is. There is no beginning of your row, kind of a thing. We're just going to go round and round until our tentacle is as long as either we want it or the pattern tells you to. The next step of this particular pattern is do 2 single crochet in each single crochet from the row below. So basically we're doing 2 single crochets in each one until we get to 16 single crochets, because that will be 2 into each one of the 8 that we started with. And this is a real test of, can I walk and chew gum at the same time? Can I talk and count to 16 while single crocheting at the same time? I think the answer is no. I'm going to wing it. When I get back to where my tail is, I'm going to assume that I've gone all the way around. And so that is doubling our stitch count, and that's going to take us from the tip of our, I can show you on here again. So the reason that we're doing that is because like the pointy end of her foot, it starts small, and you want the actual tube of her leg to get bigger. So the tentacles of the octopus are exactly the same way. I wish I had my octopus here to show you, but it is my children's toy, and I have no idea. I spent the afternoon looking for Celia, the cephalopod, to show you what the finished pattern looks like, and I did not succeed in finding it. But the last post on my Instagram or our Facebook was the picture of the finished Celia that I took before I think it might have even been before I had children. But you're going to go all the way around on this one until you get back to the beginning. But we're not going to do a slip stitch to close this. We're just going to keep going. So we've got our 16 now. You can count them, make sure you've got your 16 all the way around. And then we're just going to do one single crochet into every single crochet. It never matters where the beginning of your round is. You never have to count anything. You're just going to go and go and go and go. And you'll see right at the beginning right here, it looks like we've got a circle. But as you do a couple of rounds of your spiral here, you're going to start to see it looks like a tiny hat. It starts to like cup up. It doesn't look like a flat circle anymore. It's going to start to cup up. And that is what gives you the shape of that leg or that arm or that body or whatever it is that you're making, the stuffed animal, whatever stuffed animal piece you're making with that. So you never have to turn your piece. You never have to count anything. Making limbs is great. It's a good project for not having to think a lot about it. And a lot of the amigurumi style, and that's what this little kit is. It's the amigurumi style. Generally, these are done with thinner yarn and smaller crochet hooks, but there's no reason that you can't make a larger version, especially if you are a newer crocheter and you're feeling a little intimidated by working with real thin stuff and doing something really, really detailed like that. It's not harder to work with thinner materials, but it's going to take you longer to see progress, and it's going to be harder to see, especially in dim light, if that is something that you struggle with. And so there's no reason why you can't follow instructions for an amigurumi pattern, but do it in, like, this is a worsted weight yarn, and the hook that you would normally use, I think it's a 5.5 millimeter crochet hook. And so you're going to get it's going to be much larger than the piece was designed for, but you'll get to practice all of the steps, and it's probably not going to feel as intimidating for you to get started with that. So that would kind of probably be a tip if you're a newer crocheter and you want to do a stuffed animal, or it's been a while, or you're just feeling a little bit intimidated by the whole concept of doing a stuffed animal. I would recommend start with something big. Even if you want to follow a pattern that calls for a really, really thin yarn, do it in a thick yarn with the crochet hook recommended for the size yarn that you're using. You'll see your progress faster. You'll be able to see what you're doing a little bit faster. And a giant version of the same thing is still cute. So this, the pattern, the Celia the cephalopod little octopus, I mean, the body of the thing is this big, and then it's got the 8 legs sticking out. So, I mean, this is not a teeny tiny little thing. It's a pretty decent size. And that may just let you feel more confident if you've kind of wanted to get started with something like this, but just haven't really jumped in before. So once you've so this is basically what almost every crocheted stuffed animal, this is kind of the basic concept of what you're going to have. You're going to start with the magic knot. You're going to make a circle. You're going to make that circle bigger, and then you're just going to go around and around. I personally like the spiral construction because I don't like to have to count and figure out exactly which stitch to join it to and how to do the turning chains. But that's not really a hard thing once you get going with it. And then you're going to make it as many rows or as many inches or the measurement or whatever the pattern is telling you to do. And then you're going to close it up again at the top. Sometimes it will literally just tell you to stitch closed. I think that's what Celia does, yeah, you're just sewing you're just sort of make it flat at the top after you've stuffed it, and then you're going to attach those onto the body of the octopus. But sometimes you'll close it back up again so that it sort of stays round the whole time. And sometimes you'll make those instead of one long tube, so you can see the body and the head of this amigurumi. It's almost like a peanut. You get a little bit narrower and then you go back out again. So these aren't two separate pieces. You're just changing how wide or narrow that tube is. And so a pattern will walk you through how to do that, but it's not a challenging thing. You're going to do a couple of decreases to make it narrower, and then you're going to do a couple of increases to bring it back out again. And that's pretty much the basis of most crocheted stuffed animals, is doing that. So if you can do that, you can make a stuffed animal. I wanted to say a couple of things about your stuffing options. You can basically stuff a crocheted stuffed animal with whatever you want, as long as you keep in mind how you plan to launder this thing. The most obvious thing to stuff it with would be something like a fiber fill. You can just buy a big bag of that white fluffy stuff at any like craft supply store, and that's certainly going to work well. Most of that is designed to go through the washing machine and the dryer, and would be a fine option to use if you want to go that direction with it. I can never leave well enough alone, and sort of reducing waste and not purchasing new things if I could possibly use something that I already have is something that's really important to me. And so generally that's not the option that I go for. I generally like to stuff it with, I have a lot of yarn scraps in my life. This is the basket of yarn scraps in the office. So when we wind yarn for people, it says yarn scraps on this very classy, I think it probably used to be a peanut butter container. I just drop the little ties that you have to cut off to wind them up. So they're all fairly short, little ties of yarn, little snips. These are fantastic for stuffing, and they will go through the washing machine, because even if it's like a hand wash only yarn, the only reason that a yarn would be hand wash only is because it would felt if you machine washed it. Well, I don't care if it felts in here. I would care if it felted in a sweater that I was wearing, but we're going to stuff this pretty tight for a stuffed animal, and so if the yarn felts, I don't care. That doesn't bother me. One caveat that just popped into my head right now is if the yarn that you're using to create your creature is really light colored, like white, and the yarn that you're stuffing it with is, let's say, red or blue. Those are notorious for bleeding, those colors. You may not want to use the yarn scraps because it would not be good if your animal or your creature that you were making looked like it was bleeding through from the red scraps on the inside to the outside. But if your yarn scraps are synthetic, those are almost never going to bleed. If the yarn that you're using to make your thing is a dark color, even if some of these bled, it wouldn't be a big deal. That's probably not going to be a huge deal. If you're going to use like half a ball of yarn, I would probably unravel it and sort of just take off a bunch of it and cut it into a little bit smaller pieces. That's just probably going to work a little bit better than trying to like shove a ball of yarn into one of these. But truly all you do to stuff it is you just cram in as much as you can. It's generally easiest to stuff at the end, so create the whole thing, and just 1 or 2 rows from being finished with the project, that's when you stuff it, because it's annoying if I stuff this in now, and now I'm trying to crochet it around. The stuffing is going to keep popping out and getting in my way, so I would wait to stuff until you're basically done with your piece. Obviously you can't be all the way done because the piece is going to close up at the top, but I would wait until you're as close as you can. I would also probably recommend you put in more stuffing than you think you need. Part of it is you're always going to do another round or two to like close the piece up. So it's always going to, the shell that you're stuffing is always going to get a little bit larger than it was when you stuffed it. So if you really cram the stuffing in there, then when that stuffing, when the space gets larger, that stuffing is going to be able to expand and fill that. The other thing is it will just get, especially if it's a well-loved stuffed animal, it will just get squeezed and squished a lot. And the stuffing just tends to sort of compact over time and with use. So cram in as much as you possibly can, unless there's some reason that you really want this stuffed animal to be really floppy and softer. And it's not the absolute end of the world if you need to take some stuffing out later or add some more. Generally, you can just take out the very last few rounds, add some more or subtract some, and then do the last 2 rounds again, and you'll be good to go. Obviously, if you've already woven in all your ends and done all of that stuff, it can be a little more challenging, but it's not a bad process at all. Also, I'm going to come super close up. Can you see through the little holes in the crochet, you can kind of see just the tiniest amount, and I'm intentionally like really pushing through, but you can see the tiniest little bit of stuffing peeking through those holes. That is always going to be an issue, especially with crochet. Just crochet stitches are only ever connected at the top and at the bottom. So the longer those stitches are, most crocheted stuffed animal patterns are going to use single crochet because then the fabric isn't real holey. But if your piece especially is using a double crochet stitch, or your gauge is a little bit looser, or your hook is just a tiny bit too big for the yarn that you're using, you're going to get those little peaks of the stuffing are going to be showing through. So just kind of keep that in mind. You may even like do just a little bit like I've done and then stuff it just a little bit and look at it to see, okay, is it showing enough that that's going to bug me, or is it okay? I want to say they even sell stuffing that's different colors, but I might have made that up. When I think of the fiber fill that you buy, it's always white. So I don't know if they make like a darker color that's going to show less against dark things. But you can stuff with not only yarn scraps, you can use fabric scraps. I tend to stuff a lot of things with plastic bags. I have a big giant like floor poof, like a big crocheted ball thing. And we get a lot, when we purchase yarn in from a supplier, it comes packaged in plastic bags. Generally, it comes in a bag of 10, and the bag of 10 is wrapped in plastic. There's nothing we can do about it. That's just how it comes. And so I will end up with a giant like trash bag of these plastic bags at the end. And so I'll just save up a couple of giant trash bags of those just only held yarn, clear plastic bags, and I stuffed this giant floor poof. I mean, it's as big as I am, and then my kids jump up and down on it and all kinds of stuff, and then when we a month later or 6 months later, when we get another big shipment in, I'll just take out the last couple of rows and stuff the next bag of plastic bags in there, and so now this thing weighs 50 pounds. It's just plastic bags, but you can stuff the crocheted stuffed animals with really all kinds of stuff. If you have a very, very well-loved stuffed animal that you don't need anymore, you could perform surgery and transplant the stuffing from that one into the next one, or a pillow that doesn't work as a pillow anymore. You can take the stuffing out. So there's a lot of options for things to stuff with when you're stuffing your stuffed animal. So that is just the sort of the main concept of when you're doing a crocheted stuffed animal. You're making a circle. You're making the circle as big as it's supposed to be for the head or the body or the arm or the leg or whatever it is, and then you're just going around and around and around in circles until that piece is as big, as long as it's supposed to be. And that's it. It's how big your circle is and how long you make the tube is pretty much the only thing that changes. Now I wanted to go through the kit that was adorable, and then I pulled the label out so that I could use it to illustrate some of my things. So this comes all packaged up in a really cute little box. We sell them on the truck, and they are available on our website if you want, if you see me do this and desperately want to do them. And they come in all kinds of things. There's kids like this, but there's also like dogs and cats, and I think there's a narwhal and all kinds of stuff. But it comes with everything you need, and I have never done like a little one like this. So you can see this is the size of the box. It's like a 4-inch cube kind of thing, and then this is the size of the little kid that goes in it. So it's not itty bitty tiny, but it's on the smaller side compared to some of the other things that I've done. I've not done tons of crocheted stuffed animals. I've done a couple and a couple knitted ones, but I thought it would be fun to do one of these. So I'm gonna pull out all of the instructions and see if following the pattern really does follow all of the things that I said that it would. So it's got my materials list. So I have like, this is the color of her little sweater. These are the color of her pants. And then this is her arms and legs and her hair. Her hair was the thing that sold. So my 5-year-old has super blonde hair like this, and the hair on this little doll is what sold my daughter on really wanting this one. And then she's got little cheeks and little like ballet shoes that are done with this. And then you've got silver sparkles for her like hairbret. That's in her hair, and then there's a little bit of black for her, like her eyes and her nose and her mouth to put on there. So it has all of the parts, which I kind of like, and I'll show you the picture again, because I feel like I keep putting it in and out. Oh, it's not focusing very well. But that's the idea of what we're making. And then it has the little tools that you need in this bottom part, I think is the idea. Yeah. So we've got our crochet hook and even our tapestry needle for weaving in ends and like stitching on the eyeballs and stuff. So it's cute. So far I'm impressed. And then the instructions are basically just a list of what order to do things in. So it's telling you the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to make her cheeks, like her little red rosy cheeks. And so it tells you what yarn to use. So anytime you're looking at a pattern, I think a lot of people get intimidated by figuring out how to get started with the pattern. So I'm just going to talk as I read this pattern and I've been crocheting since I was 8 and I am nowhere near 8 anymore. So I've been doing this a little while. So I'm just going to sort of talk out loud with when I'm getting started with the pattern. These are the things that I look at. So it's nice that this has everything in it. So the first thing when you're starting a pattern, whether it's for a crocheted stuffed animal or for anything else, the first thing you want to do is make sure you have the right yarn and make sure you have the right either knitting needle or crochet hook. And so this is nice because you do. It came with those things, but you want to make sure, especially your yarn is the correct thickness. Because if they used a tiny yarn and you use a giant thick yarn, you're going to get a giant version, or a tiny version if you use a tiny yarn. And the correct hook size is important, especially with the stuffed animals, because you want to make sure you don't get that peeking through of your stuffing if it's way too loose. So we've got all of the materials that we need, and I kind of just like to take it one step at a time. I don't feel like I need to understand everything that's going to happen in the pattern before I start. So I kind of take it one step at a time and think, okay, I know how to do that. So it's saying in this color, the peachy cheek color, you are going to start by chaining 3 and then doing 1 double crochet. And you're going to turn and work around. So you're just creating that tiny, tiny little like circle for this. So first you do the cheeks. You're just making a circle in crochet. Then you're going to do the hair base. So I'm guessing this is like the bottom of her like awesome bouffant hairstyle that she's got going. Where you're going to do, it's the same thing. You're going to do your magic ring. You're going to increase it, do more than one stitch into each stitch that you've created. And you're just going to then keep going around and around, and you're increasing and getting bigger. And then you do a couple of rounds where you don't increase, and then you decrease and come back down. And so you've made that bright orange lump of hair that she's got on the top there. And then the head and the body are one piece where you're starting at the top and you're increasing and then going straight for her head, decreasing down for her neck, increasing and going straight for her body, and then decreasing at the bottom to make that like peanut shape that she's got. And then it's giving you some instructions for assembling and how to sew. You're going to sew on the face before you put the stuffing in and before you attach the arms and the legs and stuff. You're going to sew that in. I would tell you when you're doing faces, they can be massively challenging to the point where sometimes I just don't put the faces on at all because it's easier without them. But I would recommend, if you're going to stitch the face on, stuff it before you commit. Stuff it and look at it and say, do I like this? Because what something looks like flat before you've added the stuffing, and then you stuff it, and then the eyes look super crooked and whatever, you may not be as happy with it after the stuffing is over. And then you make your arms and your legs and sew them on. So this pattern looks like it would be very approachable. I always like to sort of look at how long is the pattern. So this one comes in a variety of languages, so it's just the blue, and it's only like one section here, and half of this one and half of this one, and then there's like 4 lines on the other side. So it's basically, if you put them all on one like 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, all of the instructions for this would fit on one side of one sheet of paper, which to me is always a good sign. So I think this would be a fun, quick project if you're a more experienced crocheter, and I think something like this, or any stuffed animal kind of a piece, would be a fun project to do if you just think it looks interesting but you've never done anything like it before. So I hope that this was helpful. I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope that I can get it done as fast as I think that I can, so that my kid will be happy about it and not have to pester me about it a lot. She is 5, and the patience level is appropriate for a 5-year-old. So I hope for my own sanity I can get it done pretty quickly. I'm going to stick all of these pieces back in there, and then I'm going to go inside and have delicious dinner while our whole house smells like boiling down maple sap, which is very lovely. That has been a huge plus. This is our first year collecting maple sap and boiling for syrup. We do most of the boiling outside, but then you bring it in to like finish it off, where you can pay more attention to it as it gets close to done. And it's just really lovely. It makes the whole house like warmer and smell nice and humid, so it's not so dry like it has been. So it's been a fun little experiment to do the maple sap thing too. But 5-gallon buckets of essentially water maple sap are heavy. So I can tell that I haven't been doing a lot of active things over the winter for sure. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and I will see you next Wednesday. We do our little Technique a Week craft clubs every Wednesday. I try to alternate between knit and crochet. I skipped a week in there. We had 2 crochet ones in a row. So I'll probably do 2 knitting ones in a row, coming from now. But I will see everybody later.